This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. I'm joined today, once again, by Jill Bucaro, integrative health practitioner, joining us all the way from Wellness Riot in Los Angeles. How are you today, Jill?
I'm very good. Happy New Year.
Oh, and a Happy New Year to you. Now, today, we're here to speak about something I would like to learn a little bit more about. There's something that's been in the news quite a lot lately and on the tip of many a person's tongue, and that is the importance of gut health, and more specifically, the human gut microbiome. For those unfamiliar with the term, what is the human gut microbiome?
Okay, so we'll back up and start with the GI tract
Yep.
because it can mean a lot of different things. And when we say gut, I don't know that we're always talking about the same
Right.
thing. So the GI tract is entry to exit. It's everything
Yeah.
from your mouth to your esophagus, stomach, intestines, and all the way to the rectum.
Right.
They all have different environments. And the microbiome is a term that basically speaks to not just bacteria, but parasites, fungi, viruses, all of these microscopic life forms that surround us. And that in the gut or in the GI tract mostly resides in our intestines. That's where, although we have a microbiome all over our, in our skin and our
Yep.
lungs and our saliva. But I think most of the time when we talk about our microbiome in the gut, we're referring to the intestines. So that's kind of the basics.
Now, why has it been in the news lately? Why is it such a hot topic of conversation?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple reasons. And one is that I think it turns out it's more important than any of us really thought, right?
Right.
So it's not just for digestion, although nutrient assimilation is wildly important, right? So when we eat, it's our GI tract that's responsible for breaking down and absorbing these nutrients. And they even synthesize some nutrients. So they even create some nutrients like the microbiome does. So but it's not only for digestion, which I think when we think of gut, that's what we most of us think
Yes.
about in taking in food, digestion. But a large part of our immune system, estimated about 70%, lives in and around the gut. So that also makes sense when we're taking in the outside world by eating, right? We're eating, we're drinking, and our first line of defense is our gut.
Of course.
So our stomach is wildly acidic. It's a pH of about 2 for the sole purpose of breaking down food, but also eliminating any harmful pathogens, toxins, things like that
Right.
before it gets down into our intestines. Um, so, it's really kind of like our gut's job to say like friend or foe. And so it plays a big role in our immune response. So a healthy gut is a healthy immune response. I was going to say, tagging onto that, our gut plays a role in our inflammation response. So part of our immune response and inflammation response are connected, but it helps to balance the pro and the anti-inflammatory responses because we do want, like, not all inflammation is bad. Like if we cut ourselves, right, inflammation helps
Yeah.
to heal that. So we want that, right? But too much inflammation can be detrimental. So our gut plays a role in balancing that inflammation response.
I believe there are also connections to allergic responses and also to physical and mental well-being.
Yes. Okay. So we make some of our neurotransmitters in our gut. So neurotransmitters are just the chemical messengers used in our nervous system. So serotonin, dopamine, things like that. So yes, our gut impacts our mood. There's a very close connection between the gut and the brain, primarily through the vagus nerve. But the brain and the gut are constantly talking. And I think at one point, we thought the brain was really at the center and really creating and, kind of driving the car. And really it's now maybe a half and half, depending on, what it is, the process and things like that. Our brain definitely has an important job, but we're finding out more and more that the gut is actually in control of a lot of things. For example, like making up to 90% of our serotonin in our gut. So when our gut is a mess, it absolutely, I mean, the serotonin's like our feel good
Yes.
neurotransmitter. So if we are low on that or we're not producing that, it can absolutely affect our mood. So I think, like the immune response and the inflammation and the mood and all of that, allergic response, like you talked about, like those are all things that we're finding out, like are in the gut, where I don't think we just really thought about that or knew the extent to which that was happening in the gut. So it's getting a lot of, you know, press, I think for
Yes.
good reason. It's very important.
Well, I find it fascinating because you often hear about people talking about how much of the ocean floor is unexplored, a percentage of the ocean floor. And I was thinking of the human gut biome as being almost like that, an inner verse that we don't know that much about yet. I was reading there was a study in 2020 where they pooled the data of innumerable test subjects and found that 70% of the microorganisms found within the collective biome were previously undiscovered, which shocked me. I
It's
find that
so
utterly
crazy.
fascinating. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about how many, like, tens of thousands of different types of microbes we have, living in and around us, I mean, it makes sense that a lot of them are undiscovered, because they're there, but maybe in a small amount. Whereas like, some other ones are, more predominant. So we might know about those, but it's fascinating, to learn all that we don't know, right? It's like the more you know, the more you realize we don't know.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And I was reading that one's microbiome is much more unique than one's fingerprints.
I don't know if more unique, but definitely as unique.
Yes.
Because I mean, even twins, they do studies on twins and they're different. I mean, different immediately, but then, can grow even more different as they live, maybe take antibiotics, maybe live in this environment, live in this climate, whatever, the case is. I mean, there's so many things that can alter it. That's actually one of the other things I think that why it's getting so much news is that like we can and we are doing so much to destroy our gut. And I think that's the other missing piece is like we maybe don't understand quite what's supporting it and what is not supporting it.
With that in mind, we're understanding the importance of having a healthy gut microbiome. What can be done to ensure that one keeps one's microbiome healthy?
Excellent. Yeah, I don't know about specifically in Canada, but I know in worldwide, it's estimated about 40% of people suffer from some sort of functional GI disorder.
Right.
So yeah, so I mean, yes, there's lots that we can do to support our gut, and we all should be doing that just because of the numbers of people that are suffering, and because it has an impact on those other areas. It's not just that we feel bloated or, maybe we have, acid reflux. It's really affecting us in like much, bigger ways. But what we can do to support it, is we can eat whole, unprocessed foods.
Right.
So these are the foods that our bodies know and they understand. So we can break them down. We can assimilate, the nutrients, absorb, utilize them. I mean, basically, we can get all the benefits from those foods because they are what nature has provided us. And really, not even any specifics. I mean, plants, animals, grains, fruits, like it, whatever it is, it should look as whole and unprocessed as possible. So, foods that are ingredients versus foods that have ingredients. And then, specifically within that whole unprocessed foods, is fiber rich foods. So, vegetables, fruits, beans, nuts, seeds, these can have been shown, fiber rich foods have been shown to help support healthy bowel transit time. So not too fast, not too slow, because there's issues with both. So you want, yes.
I have a question. You're talking about healthy bowel transit time. Have you, I'm
Yes.
sure you've heard of the blue poo challenge.
Is that where you eat something and see how long it takes to get out?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I
And
call it the sesame seed chant. I
well,
do it
well, there you
sesame.
go. It's
Yeah.
if you don't want to
I'm
add
like,
blue
what's
food
blue?
coloring. But I was in reading about that, where it gets people to measure how long that transit time takes. I think 28.7 hours was seen to be healthy. And that utterly shocked me. Now, I know everybody has vastly different metabolisms and different flora and fauna within their GI, but that seemed an awful long time for me.
It does seem long. I would say, so now was that the average or was that recommended?
That was what they were saying was healthy, and anything longer than that would point to some issues going on within.
Yeah, I would say under 24 hours personally, like between
Yeah,
18 and 24 hours, but it does depend on what you eat. So if somebody's
of
going to eat
course.
a high protein diet, that it just takes the longest to go through
Yeah,
our system, whereas like fruit goes a lot more quickly. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. That seems a little long to me.
that's what I thought. Now, another controversial subject, if we're talking about this microbiome and nourishing it, probiotics. What's your stance on probiotics?
Yeah. So I don't always recommend that everyone takes a probiotic. And even
Right.
if you do, not necessarily forever, because there are fermented foods and like those fiber rich foods that I was talking about. There's also prebiotic foods, which are kind of the precursors, right? It's the food that feeds our probiotics.
Right.
There's natural ways to enhance, balance, support our microbiome without taking probiotics. So I just kind of want to put that out there. Like, I don't think necessarily everybody needs a probiotic. But if you are going to take one, here's what I would look for. So one, I would look for multiple strains. So like, I said, we have thousands and thousands of strains of bacteria in our gut. And so if you're taking one strain or maybe even two or three, I think that can put the balance off, right? It can grow these couple of strains and then the rest of them, are out of balance. So you can look for multiple strains, something like 11, 15. I mean, I think they have them up to 24. It won't come close to what we actually have, but it'll nail a big percentage of some of the primary ones that most of us have in our gut. So I would say multiple strains for sure. Like all supplements, they should be clean. So what that means is, like, when you read the ingredient label, it should be what you're looking for. So in this case, the probiotics,
Yes.
and maybe one or two ingredients that like the capsule is made of, right? Once you see the artificial, flavors and colors and, conditioners and all that kind of stuff, then it's like, well, am I doing more harm than good, right? So they should just be really clean. It should be what you're looking for and maybe what the capsule or medium's made of. And then a probiotic won't do you any good if it can't make it through the stomach
That
environment,
was what I was going
right?
to
So
ask you next. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's wildly acidic, as it should be. So you want to look for ones that are shelf stable. So they always have the refrigerated ones.
Yes. Yes.
My concern is that if they can't be on the shelf, right, they can't even survive on the shelf, like how are they going to get through
Yeah.
your digestive system to get to where they tend to do the most work, which is in the intestines? So you want to look for something that's shelf stable, and they could have studies showing the effectiveness. So a lot of supplement companies will do tests or have tests available, and you can call them and ask, like, how do you know it works, right? And they can provide you with some tests. And then there are some probiotic companies that are working on delivery systems that are meant to survive the stomach environment. So it's a capsule made of something
I see.
particular, that's meant to get through the stomach environment to reach the intestines. But that's the good thing about those fermented foods, the foods that are naturally probiotic. There's some evidence to show that the food particles is actually helpful in protecting getting those probiotics like through the system, through the GI tract, in a way that proves beneficial, whereas not all probiotics are going to do that. I'm always like a food first person
Yes.
whenever possible, but that would be those would be my recommendations if you were looking for a probiotic.
When you're speaking of fermented foods, are we talking about sauerkraut, kimchi, and the like?
Correct. So sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, even yogurts,
Yes.
those kind of fermented foods, they're really wonderful. Not all fermented foods are created equal. So like there's sauerkraut that you can buy in a can, that's brined, so that's not going to have any of the benefits. And then there's yogurts, that are like, I wish I was making this up, but there's cotton candy flavored yogurt.
Oh, no, I've seen
And
those.
so, yeah, again, it's like the balance. I don't know if the probiotics are really going to do their work when they're up against these artificial colors and flavors and tons of sugar. But something that's called wild fermented, often these will be in refrigerated sections of the grocery store, but that's like naturally fermented. I mean, we used to ferment food to preserve it, and then hey, it's got all these benefits too. Like, isn't that great? So you want something that's like wild, live, it'll say something like that, even raw, like on the label, that will indicate to you that it's got the live probiotics or the beneficial part of the product.
Now, you spoke about contemporary diet, shall we say Western diet, having a terrible effect upon the health of the human gut microbiome, but also the increasing use of antibiotics have been a real problem. I mean, one could argue that antibiotics were one of the greatest scientific advancements of modern medicine. However, they have come at the decrement of the biodiversity of the average human microbiome. Is that not true?
It is absolutely true. And I think you're right. Like when there's a need for antibiotics, like we should all be thrilled they're here. I think they were overprescribed.
Yes.
I don't think the understanding of, like, if they don't work, it's not just neutral, it's actually detrimental, like you said. So I've been in that situation myself. I've been at a doctor's office. They don't know what it is. It's like, try antibiotics. I think most people have been in that kind of situation. Well, if it's a virus, it's not going to help. If it's this, it's not going to help. And not only is it not going to help, but it is going to really negatively impact your microbiome. And so that's, because it's there to wipe out, it's antibiotic. It's there to wipe out everything. And it doesn't know friend or foe, good or bad. It's there to wipe everything out. So it does wipe out the bad guys, but it takes a lot of the good guys with it. So yeah, there's definitely, it's definitely multi-factored, I think, as to why our guts are where they are.
Well, Jill, thank you very much for joining us at Good Food Revolution today, giving us a 101 on the superorgan that is the human gut microbiome. Thanks very much, and we'll be seeing you soon, I hope.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Bye for now.